mechanism by which governments confiscate wealth of the productive members of society to support a wide variety of welfare schemes. A substantial part of the confiscation is effected by taxation, but the welfare statists were quick to recognize that if they wished to retain political power, the amount of taxation had to be limited. Sound familiar? And they had to resort to programs of massive deficit spending. Sound familiar? I.e., they had to borrow money by issuing government bonds to finance welfare expenditures on a large scale. Under a gold standard, the amount of credit that an economy can support is determined by the economy's tangible assets, since every credit instrument is ultimately a claim on some tangible asset. But government bonds are not backed by tangible wealth, only by the government's promise to pay out future tax revenues, and cannot easily be absorbed by financial markets. A large volume of new government bonds can be sold to the public only at progressively higher interest rates. Thus, government deficit spending under a gold standard is severely limited. The abandonment of the gold standard made it possible for the welfare statists to use the banking system as a means to an unlimited expansion of credit. They have created paper reserves in the form of government bonds, which through a complex series of steps the banks accept in place of tangible assets and treat as if they were an actual deposit, i.e. as the equivalent of what was formerly a deposit of gold. The holder of a government bond or of a bank deposit created by paper reserves believes that he has a valid claim on a real asset. But the fact is that there are now more claims outstanding than real assets. The law of supply and demand is not to be conned. As the supply of money, of claims, increases relative to the supply of tangible assets in the economy, prices must eventually rise. Thus, the earnings saved by the productive members of society lose value in terms of goods. When the economy's books are finally balanced, one finds that this loss in value represents the goods purchased by the government for welfare or other purposes with the money proceeds of the government bonds financed by bank credit expansion. In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. If everyone decided, for example, to convert all of his bank deposits to silver or copper or any other good, and thereafter declined to accept checks as payment for goods, bank deposits would lose their purchasing power and government-created bank credit would be worthless as a claim on goods. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. This is the shabby secret of the welfare statists' tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statists' antagonism toward the gold standard. And that was Alan Greenspan in 1966. So in summary, Alan Greenspan is discussing in 1966 how he understands the Great Depression to have been caused. And he's saying essentially it was the break from the gold standard in the early teens of the 20th century that led to this easy money policy. The governments were able to spend money without really having any reserves in the banks, which is what's going on right now. And what they have is these central planners, these Fed chairmen, such as Alan Greenspan eventually became, who decide what the interest rates really are, as opposed to allowing market forces to determine what interest rates should be, given based on the actual amount of reserves, or quote-unquote gold, in the banks. So really what's going on now is that the government actually has no reserves. The reserves in the banks are decreasing, and the amount of money that the banks are printing out is increasing. So essentially the prices are going to go up. And although we are sort of hearing in the news that there's going to be this economic recovery, really we should be thinking that something bad is going to happen down the road. We have a lot more money printing going on. We have Our industrial base is overseas. Most people don't hold any gold anymore. They hold paper currency, and they believe that their paper currency is convertible from day to day to the same assets that they would have been able to get the previous day. But these are not true. I mean, the paper dollar is only worth what the United States guarantees its worth is in the future. And if the United States credit rating begins to drop, then your dollar begins to drop, because other foreign nations, such as China, which are loaning us money to support the purchasing power of our dollar, will eventually pull their money out once they realize that we actually don't have the reserves we claim to have. And they know this, but they believe that the credit of the United States is unshakable. And and I think what the point I'm trying to make is that Alan Greenspan knew, although he claims not to know now, but he knew that the real root cause of economic depressions and recessions is due to overextension of government spending. And that's exactly what's happening today. And although everyone's going to say that it's consumer confidence and you need to have more consumer confidence to allow economies to expand, it's not spending that creates economic growth. It's savings and production and people putting away for a rainy day and then investing that money in something that they can use later on and that they can sell to another person, and where both parties benefit. That is where real economic growth occurs. So what I'm trying to say at this point is I really hope that more people take a look at this video and at Peter Schiff's video, and that Alan Greenspan decides that if he's ready to face up to the music that he once knew, that he once held his academic guns to, and basically fess up to the fact that he knows that he was responsible for creating this recession, the housing bubble, the internet stock market bubble. He was responsible for both of those things. And he is now cheerleading Ben Bernanke, the current Fed chairman, with President Barack Obama into doing the same wrong practices that he made in the 90s and in the 2000s, and only worse, because he's saying that they need to hold the interest rates even longer, low even longer, and this is just going to encourage more speculative bubbles, just like those that occurred prior to the Great Depression, that eventually led the Fed to make its irresponsible decisions following these speculative booms. So I hope you all have a great day and have a good weekend.